Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Baseball Dads podcast. So today our guest is Phil Rosengren, and Phil is a buddy of mine. We became friends a couple years ago, and he runs a website called betterpitching.com, and we are thrilled to publish one of his programs, Curveball Mastery, which is a great program. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're going to talk about some other things that are kind of going on in the game of baseball. So Phil, thanks for coming on. Thanks for making the time today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Paul. No, thank you. It's an honor to be on the podcast. Now we've got a great community. I've been a fan of what you've been doing on the baseball side for years now, so it's like I said, an honor to be part of it, and look forward to it.
Cool. So let's do a 1 minute snapshot. Let's talk about your background as a professional pitcher and now a pitching instructor, working with all kinds of pitchers in Connecticut. Why don't you give us the snapshot of all things, Phil?
Yeah, kind of 1 minute snapshot. Kind of tough to do, sum it up. But you kind of bottom line, talking about better pitching, what I'm doing on that side. So I have been in baseball since I was a kid, and I'm 40 years old right now. So played in college at Northwestern University. After that, played 7 years in the minors. And when that came to an end, sort of towards the tail end of that, I got involved with working with young pitchers. And that's sort of what better pitching grew out of. So I'm based in Connecticut, do most of my training in Danbury, Connecticut right now, working with guys locally, but also with better pitching, expanding online and working with a lot more guys, around the country. But talking to baseball dads, I mean, this is, that's really what it's about for me, is that connection between you and your son. And with the way that youth sports is going right now, I think what you're doing on that with the 5, 6, 7 Dad book and everything you've been doing on that end is something I have a tremendous amount of respect for.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you've got this incredible course that we published called Curveball Mastery. And so when we look to publish something, we want to publish the best that we think is out there. And we think your curveball program is pretty awesome. We think it's the best that's out there. So this is a hot topic, right? For every, I don't know that it's maybe a question that's asked of developing pitchers, or when pitchers get to a level where, okay, I just can't throw my fastball by anybody, or or I never could, and now I realize I need to do something else. Is when every dad's asked, when do we throw a curveball? When is it safe? How do you know?
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It definitely is something that comes up a lot, and I think every kid wants to have that nasty curveball they can throw. And like you said, I think dads kind of get to that point, and coaches where, all right, this guy's not quite able to get it by guys, but he has that other pitch that can get guys off his fastball. Maybe that'll make the difference. And it's true to some extent. If you got a great curveball, that will make your fastball that much better. That being said, I mean, I think we're probably on the same page with this, is that there may not be one set age where a guy's magically ready to start throwing a curveball. But rule number one, no matter what, is always develop your fastball. So that's always where I start. And until you really master your fastball and get that as good as it can possibly be, I won't even start touching curveball with a young pitcher. Typically for me, it might be in that kind of 12, 13, 14 year age group. But like I said, every pitcher is different. So you might have an 11-year-old kid who's just got everything else locked down. I'm okay showing him the right way to throw it, because that for me is the key. That there's a lot of misinformation out there, and they're probably going to start messing around with it anyway, or have someone show it to them that might not be the right way to throw it. That kind of like turning the doorknob
right
method that's kind of gets thrown around out there, which is really not how you want to do it. So I'd rather show them the right way to do it, so that they're at least setting that foundation, so that as they develop, when they get to that 15, 16, 17, high school age, that can be a real good pitch for them and a weapon for them that's going to make them that much better, make their fastball that much better, and give them an opportunity, if it's something they're looking to do, to pitch beyond and get to that next level.
So what are some of the things that a dad should be looking for to say, maybe my son is not ready? Like what are some things that if a dad's out playing catch with his kid, or they're playing a game today, and he looks at, we could give him some tips to point to and say, if he's not doing this, or he's not this growth, or he's not, he's probably not ready. What would some of those things be?
I mean, a lot of it has to do with your foundation. So their ability to repeat their motion. Now, you
Hmm.
can't, of course, repeat your motion 100% the same every time. Even if you look at guys at the big league level, you'll see slight differences. But at the youth level, you'll see a lot more variation. So if they don't have the necessary balance, dynamic balance, balance while moving in their delivery, where they can consistently repeat their motion, where they can be fairly consistent with their command of their fastball, they're probably not ready.
Right.
So that's typically where I'd start. Now, if a kid can do all those things, he's probably ready to at least see it now, or to see the proper way to start throwing it and just develop that. But that shouldn't be the priority, especially. I mean, it depends what age we're talking about. So, kids 8, 9 years old, you know, focus on your fastball, develop your fastball,
Right.
develop your delivery, have fun playing catch with your dad out back.
Right.
But that's not really what we're talking about.
I often think that the tricky part of this is that we have a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or 11-year-old who maybe is doing all of those things
Hmm.
because their body is 4'10",
Mm.
and they're not developed, and they haven't gone through, and all of a sudden now they're 12,
Hmm.
right, and they're 6 inches taller, and and now there's this period of adjustment
Yeah.
that they almost have to relearn pitching, right? So
Right.
what are we like? How are we instructing pitchers kind of in that transition where like an 11-year-old dad maybe say, yeah, my kid's got lockdown mechanics and he throws strikes,
Mm.
but now let's start with the curveball. But a year from now, he's a different kid, you know?
Yeah, your center of gravity is moving away from the ground, so you're getting farther and farther away from the ground. It gets tougher to control that. And a kid, it's happening in months, in a period of months where all of a sudden I'm further away from the ground than I used to be. How do I control that? And what I used to do doesn't work anymore. And I definitely went through that when I was a kid. I'm 6'5", and when I was a young pitcher, I was constantly growing rapidly, and your bones and your frame gets bigger than your body's really developed yet to handle.
Hmm.
So that foundation of strength, mobility, balance, stability, that's all integral for that. So it's a tricky process, managing that, but you want to make sure that at each stage they're not losing. Let's say they were at that 10, 11-year-old age and they had that, the lockdown mechanics, and they were steady and consistent with everything. As they're developing, you want to make sure you're maintaining that and doing what you need to do to still have that in place.
So I want to ask another question, but I have my thoughts on this too. How many pitchers do you meet that have lockdown mechanics?
Very good point. Yep.
Yeah, so I think we should define,
Yeah.
lockdown mechanics. Like, so I mean, just out of 10 pitchers you see, how many do you think have what you would call lockdown mechanics?
Yeah, it depends. Very few.
Right.
Especially when they're initially coming to you, usually it's for a reason that they don't have that, right? So that's sort of the goal, to help them get to that point. If it's a kid who's like on the cusp of college, that's probably the times when I've seen guys like, all right, his mechanics are already sound. We can kind of start working on that next level. The fine tuning and the mastering of the art of pitching. But that's usually, we're talking about a 17, 18-year-old at that point.
Yeah. Would you take away a curveball? So let's say you had maybe like a 13 or 14-year-old kid who, yeah, he goes through a growth spurt and he's 15. Would you take away his curveball, or would you kind of, or maybe push pause on it for a little bit until he
Well, I
can?
mean, I guess you could potentially do that. It can be a great weapon to, again, kind of the thing that I think the reason that people often are hesitant about curveballs or scared of curveballs is because I think it's going to increase the risk of injury.
Right.
It's not a black and white thing where you can definitely say you're not risk free from injury at any point as a pitcher. There's the act of throwing a baseball and pitching a baseball repeatedly carries with it a certain level of risk.
Right.
But number of studies have come out showing that the curveball doesn't put any more risk on your arm than a fastball, and that fastball ultimately is always going to be the highest risk pitch because you're throwing it at max velocity, max intensity. I don't care how good your mechanics are. It's putting stress on your arm. So that's why taking care of your arm, your conditioning, having a solid throwing program, and good mechanics are all key. If you throw the curveball properly, it's not any more stressful than a fastball. So if that's the main concern, really managing that pitcher's workload and making sure they're not pitching too much competitively at a young age should really be the focus. Having that curveball can actually be something that reduces their pitch count if you're able to get strikeouts quicker, and instead of you're facing a batter and they're just fouling pitches off left and right because they're on your fastball. If you have that curveball in your back pocket, you can boom, either get them swing and miss, buckle them, or make your fastball that much better that then you can blow it by them up in the zone. It can actually make your pitching more efficient. So
I've never heard that.
Every case is unique.
Yeah, I've never heard that described like that. That's why I love doing these podcasts. I was once asked a few weeks ago, why do you have other people coaching on your podcast? Why don't you just do it? And this is exactly the reason why. It's because I've never heard that described. Two things already in this podcast that, and I've been doing this since I'm, 24, 25 years, that your center of gravity is getting further away from the ground. Right. And right. I've never heard that a curve that does make perfect sense. Right. Are we putting our kids in more danger by not giving away out of those high pitch totals? That's brilliant.
Well, I mean, I learned a ton from you over the years, and every coach I think that I've met that knows their stuff is always looking to learn. And the fact that you're doing this and talking to different coaches is a great thing. I know I've learned something from every coach I've ever had along the way and players I've played with along the way. So that is, I think, just a mindset that everyone, whether you're a parent of a young pitcher or a coach yourself, that you want to have that type of mindset where you're always looking to grow and get better. Yeah,
that's brilliant, man. That, because to me, like that, I almost feel like now that's you hear things like this when you have conversations with guys who are. I'm saying if you wanted to learn how to make a cheesesteak, you learn from someone who's making. You go to those places in Philly, right, that are making 1,000 cheesesteaks a day, right? They know all the tricks, right, of how to do this. And when you can hear something from a coach who's dealing with lots and lots of pitchers and really thinks about the game, you can learn something that will really change you. And to me, that just was like an instant change, because now I'm starting to think, is it better for us to put more time into rather than more time into developing those pitches? And and does that maybe balance out whatever the risk is?
I mean, the thing too is that it's something that you can develop just playing catch. It's just learning how to throw it the right way. Your mechanics should be the same on every pitch. So it's really just, it's adding onto it a different wrist position, different hand position, and getting the feel for how it should feel leaving your fingers. And that you can do just playing catch low stress. The other thing too is that I want to be careful about. I don't want to give the impression that I'm saying kids should all go out and throw a ton of curveballs.
Right.
Like it's like, oh, it's all clear. Let's just go out and you see these kids in Little League World Series throwing 50, 60% curveballs. That's not really what I think is the best for your long-term development either. Establishing that fastball should be priority if the goal is to develop to your full potential.
Yeah. No, to me, it's just a real. It's something that we should really look at as far as what's the bigger issue, right? All the studies show the more pitches kids throw, the more they get hurt. It's just everyone comes out with
that's the number one thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's no study that doesn't say that. We can argue, okay, how often are they pitching, how many pitches per inning, how much time. We can argue about all those things, but they all come out the same, right? There's one thing they all agree on. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about. I think we've done some good education on the safety of it and when to throw it and stuff like that. Let's talk about breaking off some deuces, man. Let's what goes into what goes into throwing a good curveball.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's much easier to show the grip and the hand position, wrist position, all of that. But really, once you get that good angle set, that's the key to it. Is that the fastball is throwing with your fingers behind the ball, curveball is throwing with your fingers on the side of the ball, and getting over it with your middle finger, being able to get good tension on that grip through ball release, and you get that tighter spin. So it's kind of visualizing the shape of that's kind of the first level, I guess, for me, is you want to have a good understanding of what you want this pitch to do. What does a good curveball look like? Watch guys, watch Clayton Kershaw, watch guys, Verlander right now. Watch what that pitch does and have a good visual of what you're trying to accomplish with it. Because I think some kids, they think curveball and they're just trying to spin it and thinking it's going to move sideways or, developing these real kind of slurvy, loopy type pitches. You want to be that hammer that comes out and then boom, drops off the table. And I think it was don't know if it was Bert Blyleven or someone who had apparently he credited his development of his curveball, had one of the better curveballs, breaking balls in the game, to listening to Dodgers games when he was a kid and hearing the announcer describe Sandy Koufax's curveball to him.
Huh.
And he just went out back and tried to recreate that shape of that pitch.
Yeah.
And that's how he developed his. So it's really, having that understanding of what you're trying to accomplish and then playing catch and, like I say, kind of getting over the ball, getting that overhand, that over-end spin. There's something I talk about in the program too called axis of rotation and reverse spin. So your fastball and your curveball should be coming roughly out of the same slot. Fastball, if you release it true on a true four seam fastball, has reverse spin, backspin, and your curveball basically has the reverse spin on that same axis.
Right.
But because it's going end over end, basically into the wind, if you've ever, there's another concept I talk about is running into the wind. If you're running into the wind, you feel that pressure on your face. If you got the wind at your back, you feel how nice and easy it is. And like you can run an extra 5 miles an hour. With that curveball, if you're throwing it right and you get that end over end spin, you've got the top part of the ball has more air pressure, and that's going to push it down because it's going into the wind, basically. So once you kind of have an understanding of that, the axis of rotation, getting that good tight spin, you understand how you can throw this to get it to have that movement. And then it's just kind of playing catch with it, getting feedback off what that pitch does, and you throw a good one, like, all right, that's what I'm trying to do. Let me see if I can repeat that, and working to get a feel for it.
Yes, you said two things there I think I want to highlight. Number one, you talked about tension. Being able to maintain that grip and having that tension into release point. So the guys who are listening.
That's another thing too with for little kids, if their hands are not big enough,
right,
they're probably not going to be able to get that tension, that good grip.
And they're not strong enough, right? They're just not strong enough to hold. So when you heard the word tension, that has nothing to do with mechanics. That's nothing that we can teach in a lesson, right? That's something you have to develop and build over time. Yep. And then the second thing, which is I love and agree with, is a great curveball looks like a fastball coming out of your hand. If you want, like I forget the exact quote, but it was kind of like it was about changeups, but it was like a bad changeup that looks like a fastball is better than a good changeup that looks like a changeup, right? So I don't know if you've ever heard me tell the story, but I had 6 pitchers that I was training that were all high school pitchers, so they were playing the field and pitching too, and they were up against a kid that was throwing in the 90s in the county finals, and we had a week to prepare. And all we saw was that when he was throwing 90, you could see it coming. It was on his face. It was in his body. It was in his language, right? He came at you. And when he threw his curveball, he softened and his head moved out to the side, and his release point was, he kind of tried to get on top of that curveball. And they gave that kid the only loss of the year that year because they just didn't swing at the curveball. Because he couldn't throw it for strikes. It looked like a curveball,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so what about placement of it? I'm always, I think that sometimes in a lesson, we can sometimes change the measurement of success, right? That when a kid's throwing a lesson, they throw these like pretty strikes, they look great, right? But if you're watching Verlander or Kershaw, you're the curveball expert. These guys aren't throwing. I mean, they are throwing some curveball for strikes, but that's not where their money's made, right?
Yeah, I think it was Pedro Martinez. I heard say you get him, you get ahead with strikes, get him out with balls. So you want to be able to have good enough command of all of your pitches where when you are ahead in the count, then you can get him to chase, and swing at those pitches that might look like a strike and then end up away from the barrel of the bat, out of the zone. In terms of like the stages of development, that's probably that's usually down the road. So when you're just learning, developing that pitch, first you want to just be able to command it, be able to throw it for a strike. And even if I'm working with a kid in a bullpen session, that's usually how we'll start off, is just let's work on your curveball, be able to establish that you can throw that pitch for a strike, get it over for a strike right down the middle. Boom. Once you do that, all right, now let's try to throw that nasty one that's starting off, thigh high and then drops down to the toes out of the zone. But there are a variety of different ways, different types of curveball, basically. So you could have your get ahead curveball that guys just sitting fastball first pitch and you know it, and you can just maybe not be your best, sharpest curveball, but you start it off at their shoulder and drops in over the plate. You've got your backdoor. It can be kind of a freeze pitch because, like you said, it looks like fastball out of your hand, but it starts off on a different plane. So if you throw it, if you're going to drop it in for a strike, you could start it off high, and the guy just gives up on it. So he straightens up and says, all right, there goes fastball up in the zone. Then boom, it drops over for a strike. And then you got your swing and miss down in the zone. And if you watch, some of the games in the World Series, you'll see this. So just watching, you have one of the things I tell kids is just watch good pitching this time of year. You can learn a lot by how these guys with the best arsenals of pitches, how they go about their business, how they use these pitches.
Right.
For me, that was something that I developed probably in college. At the high school level, I had a good four-seam fastball that I could throw up and a curveball that I could drop down. And as long as they look enough the same, you can be successful at that level with that. Right. When I was in the pros, I remember this was kind of at the very tail end of my career, but I'd had that curveball where I just had that great feel for it and throw it where I wanted to most of the time, not every time. But my first game with the Bridgeport Bluefish, which is an independent league team. I know there's like the Newark Bears, out in Long Island, the Long Island Ducks, but it's kind of a veterans league, so there are a lot of guys that kind of hang around that who are in the big leagues at one time in their career, and they're looking to just get their shot to get back in. At the time, Ricky Henderson was still in the league. One of my favorite players when I was a kid growing up, and I came into the game at the end of the game, my first game with the Bluefish actually, and I remember we're up a couple runs, 2 outs, runner on second base, and up walks Ricky, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm standing on the mound right now facing this guy that when I was a kid, I was a big Yankee fan growing up, so like, that's Ricky Henderson up there. But I had this vision in my mind from when I watched him on TV and him buckling on curveballs a couple times, where he would kind of, had the big crouch where you'd get in a stance wide and real hunched over. And occasionally you'll see him, if you start a curveball up at his shoulder, he'll straighten right up and then boom, watch that pitch go over the plate. Well, I got to a full count, and that kind of kicked in the back of my mind, like, oh, that's right. What if I throw a curveball right here? And ended up buckling him with a curveball to end the game.
Nice.
It was one of those moments, like Ricky was just like, that guy just strike me out. And then the manager came up to me at the end of the game and was like, if nothing else, you could always say you struck out a Hall of Famer. I was like, yes, good point.
That's a great point. I love, there was a Ricky Henderson, when he was playing in those leagues, right, that here was this guy who was in the Hall of Fame. Why is he still playing baseball? And he was like, I love to play baseball.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, he took it
serious. He was out there, he could play.
Yeah,
even when he was, whatever he was, 45, 50 years old at that point.
Yeah, but like, isn't that the thing? It's like, I thought that was the greatest quote. I heard Ringo Starr one time. Somebody asked him a similar question. It's like, why are you at like 75 years old still, touring? And he was like, what do you want me to do?
Exactly.
I don't know how to do anything else. Yeah, you want me to go sit at home? Yeah.
Yep.
So let's. I think that's. I love the way you think about that pitch. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about kind of the state of baseball, because I know you have some passionate beliefs about that. I always like to ask this question. If I'm a dad and I'm got a 14, 15-year-old kid and I'm sitting down across from you at Starbucks, and I say, I'm really confused about everything that's going on in baseball today, tournaments and travel teams and showcases and elites and all these other things. What do I need to know? What do you know that I need to know, Phil?
I think you kind of want to start with what's the end goal? What's your vision and your plan, and what do you want to get out of your baseball experience? And if it's just to be the best high school player I can be, and then I'm going to move on and do something else in college, that's a different scenario than a kid who, I've loved baseball since I was a kid. And you're like at that elite level already, and you're thinking about, I want to go on and pitch in college. I want to pitch in the pros and go after getting into the big leagues. That's a different mindset and a different approach. So number one, you just want to be realistic about that. I was a late bloomer, so probably 13, 14 years old, people wouldn't have guessed that I would have gone on and I've been fortunate to play in college and professionally, but it starts with just asking questions and learning more about that kid's situation, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. So what would be like, I think so what you're talking about here is that you have like almost a diagnostic process, right, to find out what's important for the kids. What questions do you think like a dad should ask of a coach? Because we encourage them to really question coaches about different things, especially if their kids are going to be playing on a team, and if it's a big commitment. What are some things that a dad should maybe ask of a coach?
I think the state of baseball the problem is that it's beginning even younger and younger. They're starting these elite teams at 8 years old now, where it's just tournaments every weekend and they're playing competitive games, and they're are they practicing or playing catch during the week? You don't really know, but then they've got 9 games in 3 days on the weekend, and they're the coaches, and I fully believe that all coaches, they're doing it for the most part, are doing it with the best intentions, and they're doing what they believe is the best for their players. But it's very easy to get caught up in, I've got to have a winning program. Players want to play for a winning team. Parents who are paying me money, or they want to win. And in the heat of the moment, when you were on the fence of, I know Johnny pitched Friday and threw 5 innings, but he didn't meet the pitch limit rules or whatever.
Right.
And it's Sunday, I'm going to use him again because we got a chance to win this game. And Johnny's not going to say no, and the parent either doesn't feel it's his place to step up and say something, or maybe just doesn't know, what's a safe range for him to be in terms of pitches.
Right.
How much stress has he had on his arm? What's that potentially doing to him? So you can get into that scenario where it's not what's in the best interest of that athlete's long-term development.
Right.
So in terms of what are you going to ask a coach, I would definitely try to get feedback on that coach directly in that kind of conversation where what's your approach with managing pitchers? How many other pitchers do you have on the team? Are there scenarios where your guys have pitched back-to-back games? And how do you handle that kind of stuff? I'd also just seek out, other parents who maybe have been through that same program and can give you some feedback on their own experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's super important because I don't know if you know Chris Giselle from Baseball Dudes. He's a great dude. We had him on a few weeks ago, and he was talking about guys that are in his universe, and he's educated, that went out and and pitched kids back-to-back days, and then the kids went out and played center field after that, and so there's I think and we're working on a few things here too that definitely I'm gonna ask you when we're ready, Phil, to be a part of. That's gonna hopefully educate dads about exactly what are bad combinations, like pitching back-to-back days, pitching and then playing shortstop, or going into throwing 120 pitches and then going into catch the last 2 innings,
right?
Stuff like that,
which happens.
All that
stuff happens on a regular basis. So I think that's awesome that you're doing that, because I think that's really where we're at with youth baseball, and even at the high school level with the elite and the tournament ball that's going on. It's just the education needs to be there so that people have a better understanding of what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. And if you're asking, if you're putting a young developing athlete who's maybe going through puberty and their bone plates haven't firmed up yet and they're not fully developed, and you're asking them to do what you would never ask a professional major league pitcher to do, outside of potentially Game 7 of the World Series,
right? Yep.
But you're asking them to do that on a regular basis in 10U, 14U travel ball tournament.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I know they want to. They're doing it just because they're strapped and there are limitations, and because of the structure of these tournaments, they don't know what the alternative is. They're like, well, we got to have somebody playing shortstop. We got to, if we want to win this game, we want our best player doing this. But there's one of my favorite coaches is John Wooden, and not a baseball guy, but one of the winningest coaches of all time, and had some of the best teams there in that dynasty run he had. But one of the things his players always say is he never talked to us about winning being the end goal. It was always, about just being the best that you can be. And it was about developing them. So that was really the focus that he had, was just, if I develop each one of my players into the best player that they can possibly be, being the best version of themselves out there on the court that they can possibly be, the end result is going to be we're going to win games. And if you get everyone to buy into that approach, you're going to be an awesome team. And it's easy, I think, to lose sight of that in the tournament ball culture, where the focus is on winning, where you kind of lose sight of, is this really in the best interest of this athlete's long-term development?
Right.
And that's one of the things I love about what you're doing with the 5, 6, 7 dad stuff, and with this group, is what are we doing in this time frame that these young athletes are developing, and how can baseball be a vehicle, and something that sets them up for success when their playing days are done, because they're going to be done someday? And are we helping them develop into men that can go on into the world in a positive, productive way?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last little segment here, I want to switch gears again, because we had your friend Josh Heenan on. And,
oh, nice.
Yeah, and he talked about how you guys work together. So we definitely, it's a thing that, especially if pitching coaches are listening, and or dads are listening, of who you kind of need in your stable to really get your son to to maximize whatever his potential is. And Josh talked about working hand in hand with you, which is something that we preach, right? You need to have these fitness, health, and medical professionals that can do really a lot for us. Is there some thoughts you have about that relationship, or can kind of give us some idea of how it works with you and Josh?
Absolutely. I mean, working with Josh has been one of the best things that I've done with the young pitchers I work with. That's been the most benefit to them and help them get better results, because the pitching side of it is just one piece of the puzzle. The mechanics side of it, the pitch development side of it, you can do everything you can from that point. But if you don't have the necessary mobility, strength, and whatever you need physically to handle the mechanics that I think might be optimal for you, they're not going to work. It's going to fall apart. So you have to develop that foundation of strength. And I think if you're a guy who has a son who is wants to be a pitcher at the next level, really develop to their maximum, that has to be a big piece of the puzzle. It's just their physical and athletic development.
Yeah.
So in addition to just playing other sports and developing the coordination that you can from those sorts of things, hooking up with a guy like Josh, a great strength coach who understands the demands of pitching, which are very unique and different than the way you might train another high-level athlete, football, basketball, you name it. You want someone that understands that, and that isn't just going to give your guy a football program. Working hand in hand with that, he's able to tell me, look, this guy's got a hip mobility deficiency, and he's not going to be able to move the way that you might be suggesting until we get this corrected. Here are a couple things that you can add in during his warm-up before you guys start working on your pitching. That kind of stuff has been invaluable.
Yeah, and like we were talking about with Josh, it's like these guys can help us or help the pitchers actually do the stuff we're trying to get them to do, and eliminate the things that are stopping them, which I'm sure you and I would both agree is out of our skill set. It's just not in our area of expertise to help them fix a hip or fix an ankle. Right. And sometimes we can learn enough to be dangerous about it.
Right.
But when you really, you need to have that education and that experience to be able to look at this and run it through the assessment tools and say, yeah, this is a problem. Here's what we need to do to fix it. And it's going to take this long. And I would encourage just the coaches to really, I'm like a broken record on this, to have those relationships. So, Phil, why don't we give everybody, how do they all get in touch with you? I know you offer a lot of camps and instruction, and you also offer virtual coaching for people that are all over. We have sent some people of our clients to you, and I'll just say the feedback has been great. We just recently had one of our players, I believe he traveled out to you, correct? Yep. Traveled out to you and came back and was thanking me profusely for sending me to
well,
you.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Likewise.
So how do we get in touch with you? Kind of tell us everything that you got going on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the main hub is betterpitching.com, so people can always find me there and everything that Better Pitching is about there. Different programs I've got, whether you're local to the New York, Connecticut area, or online programs that are available through that, or remote coaching situations. That's probably the first place I'd point people. They can go there. They can get a free guidebook on sort of my philosophy on pitching mechanics. Another place might be on Facebook. So Better Pitching on Facebook, you'll find my Facebook page there. And those are really the two main ways that I get in touch with people. So if you're interested and like what you see there, you can certainly sign up and get on the email list. That's probably the way I communicate the most. And then Facebook, Better Pitching would be the other way.
Yeah. So here, let me just for the dads that are listening, let me just give a little plug for having a virtual coach. It's kind of a unique situation, right? That how can a pitching coach help you from a distance? There certainly are limitations to it. There's no doubt about that. But technology is moving very quickly, and those limitations are becoming less and less. So let me tell you why I think it's good for you to reach out to someone like Phil to help you virtually, is because I think a lot of people come to me and say a couple things. They say, we have this coach that's a part of our program, and we're not getting the results that we want from him. And we kind of can't leave. There's the politics of the situation that sometimes happen that say, we kind of can't leave. And so in that situation, it helps for you to be able to, not anonymously, but work with someone who can give you an outside opinion. The other thing, too, is that I hear from dads is that a lot of times the opinions they get, they know are biased based on their situation. So different coaches will tell you different things based on maybe what is also in the best interest of the coach or that team or the academy, not necessarily always the best interest of your kid. That's not always the case. Those are rare, but it does happen. So to have, again, a third-party person that you can go to give you advice is invaluable. The last thing I hear is that we go to XYZ Academy or we play at XYZ High School, and they go to ABC Construction Academy, and we can't be seen going into
right.
I'm running out of letters. We can't be seen going into the other baseball academy, or we can't be seen going to another coach. And unfortunately, yeah, it's bad, but that's the reality. But that's why you can use a coach like Phil, who has no horse in the race and can give you honest assessment, can give you instruction based on what's best for you, not always what's maybe the best for that situation that you're in. So I would encourage you to check that out, because we talked to a lot of people. It's a very valuable resource that we're blessed to live in this age where we can have that on. So please check out everything that Phil's got. And I can't endorse him enough. We spent some time together. He's come out to a couple of our business events, and we're always, like I said, we're sending people to him, and we're working with him, and we publish his Curveball Mastery. So we really love Phil, and we can't endorse him enough. So, Phil, any final words of wisdom for the dads who are listening?
No, I mean, you covered a lot here, and again, it's really been an honor to be on the show. I think that one of the best things about baseball is that connection that it helps you develop with your son. And when I think about baseball, it's Field of Dreams. It's that father-son connection, playing catch with your son. So, I know it can get, it's easy to get caught up in the frenzy of elite travel ball and getting to the next level. And that college recruiting process can be a bear, but just try not to lose sight of that and enjoy the time you've got with them while you do. And any part that I can play in helping them accomplish whatever dreams they have for themselves. It's kind of my honor to do that. So thanks again for having me on. I love what you're doing with this and everything that you're doing on the baseball side.
All right. Well, Phil, thank you very much for tuning in. And guys, go check out everything that Phil's got, and we'll see everybody on the next show.